Hey, welcome to the latest episode of Conversion Experts. I am really excited to be sitting down with our new social media manager, Parker Erickson. Parker, you want to tell us a little bit about what you did prior to Strikepoint?
Sure. Hey, Brian. So I'm Parker. I'm originally from Orange County, but I actually was living in Austin, Texas, where I was a social media manager for an agency there. And we had a number of different cool clients. We worked in the healthcare space, hospitality space, but also more interestingly, the death care space. So that was a
Wow.
very interesting client to work with. Lots of really interesting customers and interesting comments that we got on social media, but it was a very interesting exercise to get into that headspace.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting jumping off point for us, maybe. I think a lot of people assume social media makes sense for hospitality and
Mhm.
travel and consumer products, but the death care space, like that's a sensitive topic. It's also one that I don't think most people would assume would have a big social media following associated with it. And I think we deal with a lot of clients too that have interesting niches that maybe wouldn't automatically assume that they'd have a lot of followers on social media. Could you tell us a little bit about the learnings from being in that niche and what that was like? And how is social media appropriate for a company that has such a unique positioning?
Yeah, I know that's a great question. So, really, there are two sides to the business in the funeral industry. So, one, there's the at need, which means someone has passed away recently, and then there's the pre need. So, those are people who are pre purchasing their end of life arrangements. So, there's those two segments of our audience, and both of them were heavily active on social media. So, we had tailored messaging to approach both of those different audience segments. So, for people who are at need, we ran lots of Facebook ads, and we also ran a lot of organic social media content around that too. But for the pre-need side of the business, we made sure that we had a really tailored strategy to move people through the funnel in order to have access to resources where they could learn about end of life arrangements, and then we could collect that information and then remarket to them.
That makes sense. I love some of the language you're using already.
Mm,
You're talking about funnels and the stages and segmentation of the audience for these clients. This is language that, if you've watched Conversion Experts before, you know at StrikePoint, we're all about results. We're all
mm,
about measuring an impact and getting a return on an investment. And I think that's a concept that is largely in most people's minds not connected to organic social media. I think a lot of people think about beautiful images and
sure.
like building a following, and maybe that following is somehow loosely correlated to results. But hearing you talk about the strategy, in this funeral care, death care space, which is again kind of
Mm,
not the first thing people would think, it really starts to help, I think, paint a picture and align to how you can take a strategic approach to organic social, and that it can be part of a strategy that is about driving customers, driving sales, driving measurable results for your clients. Do you have kind of a system or a framework, or how do you, when you encounter a new client, maybe it's not as weird of a niche as death care.
mhm.
How do you start off the conversation? What are some of the first things you'd like to know about a client's business to figure out how you'd approach social for them?
Well, it's all about the audience, right? And social media platforms, they're essentially entertainment platforms. So we really need to know, who are we talking to? That's the first step, is like, who's this audience? Who's going to be engaging with this type of content? And then next, it really is a deep conversation with the client to understand, what are their goals? Are they trying to increase, traffic to their website? Are they trying to increase engagement on their content? Are they trying to find those insights through social media? So once we establish those goals, then we move forward on developing these content pillars, which allows us to organize our content and then be able to create things at scale so that we have tons of things that we can populate a content calendar with.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. When you think about the different clients that you've worked with, obviously
Mm,
death care and
mm.
hospitality, have you come across any clients where you're like, you know what, there is no social strategy here?
Mm.
Or has there always been some way that you've figured out how to leverage social for the goals that the business has?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. So I also worked for a huge roofer, a commercial roofer in the United States. They had about 50 different locations, and they were a $300 million a year business. But to be honest with you, trying to make shingles cool is not really the easiest thing to do. But When you encounter a client like that, or you encounter a product that doesn't seem to have like a lot of play on social media, there are other areas of the business that you can look at that do have play on social media. So what we did is that we looked into their philanthropic arm of the company. They were really active in local charities in their geographical areas. So we decided to lean into those types of content, and that achieves goodwill in the community, and it's also a good recruiting piece that you could put on a platform like LinkedIn.
That's awesome. I love the strategic thought process there of finding that niche. Might be helpful too, just for the audience. Social as a category has expanded a lot, and some of the platforms, even just in the last couple of years, have got a lot of traction. When you think about social, can you run through kind of the main channels that we're talking about and thinking about these days?
Sure. So I grew up with Facebook. Facebook still has the most play, but Instagram, most audiences are very Instagram forward. So I would say if you're going through a hierarchy of social media, I would do Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and then if it's a more professional type of focus, then of course LinkedIn. But really, if you're creating things for Instagram, you could easily repurpose those for TikTok or vice versa. And then, short form video content has so much play on other platforms. They're just hungry for it. So if you're creating things with a mindset of putting it on Instagram and TikTok first, then you'll be fine with your content strategy.
So you mentioned entertainment earlier and then short form content. I want to circle back to those concepts because I feel like seem like critical pieces in how you approach social. But I'm also curious, as we're talking about platforms, what are your thoughts on Twitter, which I didn't hear you mention, and then Threads, this new spin-off that's coming out of the Meta platform that's basically like a direct competitor to Twitter. Do you think those platforms make sense to consider in social strategy, or how do you think about those?
Well, let's talk about Threads. Have you been on Threads? Have you been
I,
looking at
I've
it?
I've played around with it a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's very addicting and it's a lot of fun. And really, we're in a really exciting space in social media, right? Because this is a complete game changer for Meta. And I believe that Threads right now, if you're not on it, you're really doing your brand a disservice. Currently, there isn't a playbook for a brand marketing strategy on Threads. So I would recommend just seeing what sticks, right? Putting content out there, seeing what your audience is wanting to engage with, and then building off of that, taking those insights and then trying to increase your scalability of your content on Threads. But going to Twitter, Twitter is great still for news. Lots of journalists, lots of newsworthy content is still posted on Twitter. I personally think that because there is a lot of brand instability over there with the new rebrand of X. I mean, come on, have you seen the new logo? I mean, what's Elon thinking, right? But I would say that Twitter still has play, but you would need to prioritize other platforms like Threads and Instagram. I would focus your strategy if your audience isn't there on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. The nature of content consumption on Twitter does seem pretty different than a lot of the other social platforms. So, what brands or companies it may or may not be appropriate for, sounds like it's down the list in your mind of where people should put energy into, and from a strategic planning standpoint, that does make a lot of sense. Let's go back to the entertainment and like short form content piece, because we we do a lot of paid media traditionally at Strikepoint, and that means for us a lot of ad creative and usually a lot of video ad creative. That tends to also kind of be short form in nature. But one of the trends we're seeing on that front has been trying to create ads that don't feel like ads, that feel like, organic short form
Sure.
content. So is there a system or a framework, or how do you think about crafting good short form content? And you could pick one channel as an example if you want, because I assume they might be different for each.
Absolutely. And people have the attention span of a goldfish right now. There's so many competing things, especially on social media and online for people's attention. So you honestly only have 2 to 3 seconds to hook someone's attention. So I would recommend trying to find a hook, a really good hook, distilling down your core message into one interesting hook that you can put at the top of the piece of content, where you can then serve that with some either like really catchy piece of audio that will just grab someone's attention immediately and make them want to keep watching. So that would be step one. And then really brand storytelling and telling an effective narrative within your ads, even in that short period of time is really important because people want to be walked through a story, and then you have your CTA at the end to make them take an action.
Got it. I love the integration of CTA. That's important for our results-driven marketing
Sure.
approach. Um, any examples that come to mind for you of some campaigns in the past of like this was a really effective piece of content that was created for any clients or campaigns that come top of mind?
Well, coming top of mind is what you recently showed me with, was it Crypto 101 or
I think you're thinking of a Gold and
Gold
Silver
and Silver
Summit.
Summit? Yeah, no, so I think that creative approach was so unique, and then the results spoke for themselves, right? With all those shares, I think it was what, 6,000 shares?
Yeah. So what Parker's talking about is it was kind of a political cartoon piece of content. So taking some form of creative that's well known and already has some resonance. And I think why that one worked is we were joining an existing conversation that the audience was already having. So felt like we were able to insert the content into conversations that we're having on the social platform, and we just gave them a new iteration of the existing conversation to interact with. Is that a strategy that you feel like you've used in the past, or is one that's worth repeating, trying to join in on an existing conversation?
Right. Well, so going back to my experience in the death care industry, we had a very interesting campaign where we were kind of using or employing a trope of having the talk. So, having the talk, with your children kind of about the birds and the bees, we were talking more about having the talk as an adult with your adult children about your end of life arrangements. So, having something that has that emotional connection and has kind of like that story element to it as well, we were able to leverage that idea and then turn it into a conversation about sitting down with your loved one and really methodically planning out your end of life arrangements.
That one thread in that comment that stands out to me is kind of this concept of authenticity. I feel like that's a trend in marketing in general right at the moment. I would imagine in social, that's something that maybe even comes more to the forefront. So, we're on the ad creative side, one of the working most successful trends has been user-generated content. It's kind of like real feedback loop from real customers interacting with products. Is that something on the organic social side that you feel like is at the forefront, this element of authenticity? And if so, do you have any, the example you just gave kind of makes sense, like having this real, real conversation that maybe is like the elephant in the room in that such a
Sure.
scenario where people don't know how to start it, and it's speaking to this chord of truth. But what do you think about this concept of authenticity, and like how does that come into play as how you think and approach social?
Your audience isn't stupid. They know when they're being pandered to, and they know when something that you're saying isn't genuine or it's disjointed from your brand and how they perceive your brand. So, really, it's all about getting a really solid understanding of who you are, not just as a brand, but who you are and how you relate to your audience. And once you really understand that, then showing up and being authentic, creating those conversations that are really true to who you are and what your mission is, that's when people are really going to sit up and take notice and say, oh, wow, like they are, I want to listen to them.
Yeah. So that thought, being authentic and like not having a disconnect from who you are as a company or a brand, how does an agency fit into that? Because I think maybe some people's initial thought is like, we should do this ourselves versus hiring an agency to do it for us because we know our product, we know our customers the best. How would you respond or think about why would you hire, in this case, Strikepoint or you, to come in and help run social for a company? Does that help with the authenticity? Does it hurt?
No, I think it's actually very helpful. I've worked for in-house companies before, and while they know their brand and their product line very well, it sometimes takes an outside organization to really shine a light on some of the areas or some of these blind spots that brands necessarily don't have when they have in-house marketing teams. So when you do have an agency come in and start doing like an audit of your brand, like we've done for so many clients, that can really highlight areas where they weren't really looking or they didn't feel that that would have any play on social media. Having an agency kind of like identify those specific areas will allow a new, fresh perspective. And especially when we have social fluent experts here at Strikepoint that can come in and really do that in-depth analysis and find like, hey, you guys have this really good brand element. You have this mascot that we could have some play on. Like, I think a really good example is Duolingo, how they leverage their bird, how they turned that entire thing into a whole marketing campaign, right? And it took
Yeah,
their agency to do that. So that would be a really good example of that.
that makes a lot of sense. Um, do you have like one or two just like rapid fire tips for the viewers today? Like if you're gonna do, could be a tip, a trick, a tactic, something that the viewers
Mhm.
could take away right now and go implement tomorrow that could positively impact what they're doing on social.
Show your face, get on camera, don't be shy, and also don't overthink it. It's better to post than to not post. So get on camera, be genuine, get in front of your audience, and start putting content on social media.
Yeah. Easier said than done. I feel like it
Definitely.
takes getting pushed sometimes, but very, very true. If you're not out there, you're not getting any results.
Absolutely.
Obviously, there's this massive movement around AI,
Hmm.
Chat GPT, Midjourney. There's so many tools. I feel like my social feed is just full of companies saying
Hmm.
social, AI for this, AI for that.
Hmm.
What are you doing with AI as it relates to social? How big of an impact is that having on how we approach things?
AI has been such a help for ideation and for concepting, but it's still in its infancy where it doesn't produce something that's 100%. So when you're scrolling through your feed, especially on social media, you can really tell when companies are just phoning it in and they're using AI generated captions. So my recommendation is that if you are going to be using AI or some type of generative AI, to really look through what it's producing and still add that human element into it, because people aren't stupid. They can tell that if something is AI generated, it lacks that fire that really good brands put into their copy. So that would be my recommendation if you are using AI. But I will say that as a marketer, it has made me much more efficient, and it's been a godsend in trying to come up with new ideas and being able to do it really quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's we talked a little bit about authenticity, right? So
Hmm.
there's maybe
There you
a
go.
juxtaposition with AI and authenticity. I will say that I've noticed inside the agency, one of the coolest use cases for AI
Hmm.
that I've seen is in the research phase, and where
Hmm.
it's actually maybe helping us be more authentic because we're understanding our audience and our customer and an industry or a very small niche better because how quickly we can research and understand complex topics or subgroups of audiences.
Yeah.
Um, has that been true for you on the social side as well? Is that maybe there's an element of research that it's provided to build better, more authentic content?
Absolutely. I mean, I got my start in the industry as a copywriter before this whole AI revolution happened, and I wrote for tech publications. I wrote for some pretty obscure industries where I needed to take a lot of time just to like get into that space and absorb as much knowledge as I can. Now with ChatGPT, if we're trying to create content for a client that maybe I don't have a lot of background in, it's a matter of just asking it, prompting it to give me top 5 bullet points about this type of target audience that would like this product. And then that gives me a jumping off point where then I can go and do my own independent research. But at least I'm being directed and I don't have to spend time just sifting through Google just to find information.
Well, Parker, it has been amazing talking with you. It's so cool to learn about your past, and I'm really excited about what you're building in the social division here at Strikepoint. And in fact, if you watch this Conversion Experts episode, Parker and his team are offering to do a free social media audit for the first 10 companies that reach out from this video. You just have to click through on the link below this video, and you can find the form to request a free social media audit. Parker and his team will dive into your current social practices, give you a ton of free value on what you might be able to improve and do better, whether or not you ever work with StrikePoint. This is not a requirement to become a customer. We just want to put out there the knowledge that Parker has and the team has and give that out to some people that are watching our content. So if you're interested in that, please click through on the link below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode.